Today we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. My idea for this show was to invite guests and get the conversation started, to take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. And we encourage our listeners to look within themselves to take decisive action to make a positive difference. Welcome to Bill Myers Inspires. I'm your host, Bill Myers, and today's show is Remembering September the 11th, Perspectives 20 Years Later, with my guest, Mr. Shrian Tiwari. I have a few questions to sort of set this up. So, where were you on September the 11th? As we approach the 20-year anniversary of this tragic event in America, let us take a moment to explore its lessons and how September 11th has changed us. To give you a little bio on my guest today, Shrian Tiwari, he is a director, writer, actor, filmmaker who loves storytelling. Born and raised in India, now he calls New York and New Jersey his home. He quit his successful corporate career to follow his passion and build a new career in the entertainment industry. He has worked in several short films and TV shows as an actor and starred as the lead in the beloved indie feature film Werewolf Ninja Philosopher, which had a theatrical release both in New York City and Chicago. As a screenwriter, his first, hold on, I'm lost within my thing. As a screenwriter, his first feature-length screenplay with co-writer Lapacazo Sandoval got optioned recently, and the project is in the early stages of pre-production. He's now working on his second feature-length screenplay, soon to be optioned. As a director, he recently directed his first screen project, Red is My Color, that's in post-production currently. He also is working on creating 3 TV shows and a few films with various creative partners. He also runs the digital magazine, MyNewYorkEye, and is the host of the podcast, ArtApproved. After 5 years of his corporate break, he is back in the IT business consulting as an IT executive. He's also a full-time dad, the job he loves the most. In whatever time is left, he loves to eat and travel. I'm with you on all counts, Art. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. To invite me on.
Well, you are so welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
This wonderful show. Well, I've been fantastic, amazing guest. Really, thank you for that wonderful introduction as well. And this particular question that you raised earlier for the listeners as well, right? I feel like everybody has a 9/11 story. We remember that moment, and I can tell you from somebody who was not in America. I was in India when this had happened, and I still remember. I still remember when it happened. I was taking a train to my grandfather's funeral. He had just passed in the week before, and I was taking the train to my village, and suddenly there's like everybody started talking in the train. And even in India, something happened, like what happened is, and people are like, okay, it seems like in America, and the terrorist bombed a building or hit a building, and something was not very clear. And by in a couple hours, of course, it was all over. It was all over the news. It was repeatedly playing everywhere, and it shook everyone to core, right? Even India is a democracy, much newer than America, but has had a fair share of problem of terrorism coming from a certain part of the world, right, from Pakistan, Afghanistan. I mean, I'm not talking about politics, but the fact there is a terrorist activity that India has been impacted with, and that was a big news and pretty hurtful to hear that happen. And, so many people losing their lives to this unfortunate incident. Um, and then it became a thing of past in years to come. I was in India and, got my job and whatever, finished engineering, got my job, came to United States in 2007. And, I talked to friends and people, and you have lived here many years. And, there is like a pre 9/11 America and there's a post 9/11 America. Lot changed in the US after 9/11,
Hmm.
especially for somebody like me who may not have seen the pre, but the post experience of somebody who does not look like whatever somebody's definition might be of a traditional American or Westerner, right?
Yeah.
As in white skinned.
Ab-
So and I've experienced the effect of being in post 9/11 America, which has reduced in the years to come and changed in many ways. But I remember, coming here and that uh, you know racial profiling became a thing. In early 2001, thing got started called the Patriot Act. I don't know if you've heard of that, which enabled law enforcement to search people without warrants and such. And I have friends who experienced that firsthand. Who of people from India, people from South Asia, who look Middle Eastern, and there is no definition. If you're not white, then somehow you fit in that different group.
Right. Right.
And and this idea of feeling different and doing things different. Then I came and I learned about that okay, maybe I shouldn't grow my beard too much because it's okay to look Hispanic, but here don't want to look Middle Eastern
Right.
because
Right.
that might impact your air travel certain ways. And if you're taking a picture in some area, how it might affect and things have gotten better, I guess, in some places, but it's a thing that that I did not realize when I was back in India, right? I did not realize what the aftermath of 9/11 was, that people of color uh, continue to live. But on the other side, I remember in 2007 going the first time I visited New York and standing in front of the site of where the World Trade Center used to be. The rubble was still getting cleaned, and and feeling that deep sinking feeling that a country like America, because growing up again, I understand I'm an American now, and I understand America differently than I did 20 years ago. But it was a sinking feeling seeing that site and uh, the aftermath of that, right in front of you, that what hatred can do to people, and blind faith in some ideology, or some, not ideology, just ideas, I feel
Right.
can do. And it's something that I have lived in New York since for over 10 years, and I've seen these things. And every year I used to go to 9/11 Memorial on the 10-year anniversary. I was there, and I've visited since the memorial has been built. And I lived in and walked through there every day for work for a long time. I saw the new World Trade Center being built, and I have a lot of respect for that as a symbol of our resilience, and
Yeah.
standing up to it. So there is a lot of emotions I think all of us feel around 9/11, which deep uh, hurtful experiences that I and people like me have had, too. Deep pride in what we accomplished after to fight back, and deep sorrow for people who lost their life to this. It's a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, I want to, before we get too far away from it, and then I will come back and sort of share with you the answer to the question where I was when this took place. But first, I think it's very important that we Again, I think that a lot of times 9/11 just gets associated with this image of two planes hitting the World Trade Center. And I think it's really important to dive into a little bit more of the details and actually what happened on that day. So I went to pull some information so that we can sort of, again, create a context by which to look at what really went down, because the World Trade Center was a part of this story. But so this is brought to us from the History Channel, and it talks about the World Trade Center. On September the 11th, 2001, 19 militants associated with the Islamic extremist group Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 planes and carried out suicide attacks against targets in the United States. 2 of the planes were flown into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C., and the 4th plane crashed in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Almost 3,000 people were killed during the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which triggered major U.S. initiatives to combat terrorism and define the presidency of George W. Bush. The Patriot Act, as you mentioned, just as a sidebar, the creation of Homeland Security was the first order there, so I want to go to the Pentagon attack and share about that. As millions watched the events unfolding in New York, American Airlines Flight 77 circled over downtown Washington, D.C., before crashing into the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters at 9:45 a.m. Jet fuel from the Boeing 757 caused a devastating inferno that led to the structural collapse of a portion of the giant concrete building, which is the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense. All told, 125 military personnel and civilians were killed in the Pentagon, along with all 64 passengers aboard the airliner. The Twin Towers then later collapsed, less than 15 minutes after the terrorists struck the nerve center of the U.S. military. The horror in New York took a catastrophic turn when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in a massive cloud of dust and smoke. The structural steel of the skyscraper, built to withstand winds in excess of 200 miles per hour and a large conventional fire, could not withstand the tremendous heat generated by the burning jet fuel. At 10:30 a.m., the north building of the Twin Towers collapsed. Only 6 people in the World Trade Center towers at the time of their collapse survived. Almost 10,000 others were treated for injuries, many severe. The next portion of this is Flight 93. Meanwhile, a 4th California-bound plane, United Flight 93, was hijacked about 40 minutes after leaving Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. Because the plane had been delayed in takeoff, passengers on board learned of events in New York and Washington via cell phone and airphone calls to the ground. Knowing that the aircraft was not returning to an airport as the hijackers claimed, a group of passengers and flight attendants planned an insurrection. One of the passengers, Thomas Burnett Jr., told his wife over the phone, "I know we're all going to die. There's 3 of us who are going to do something about it. I love you, honey." Another passenger, Todd Beamer, was heard saying, "Are you guys ready? Let's roll," over an open line. Sandy Bradshaw, a flight attendant, called her husband and explained that she had slipped into a galley and was filling pitchers with boiling water. Her last words to him were, "Everyone's running to first class. I've got to go. Bye." The passengers fought the 4 hijackers and are suspected to have attacked the cockpit with a fire extinguisher. The plane then flipped over and sped toward the ground at upwards of 500 miles per hour, crashing in a rural field near Shanksville in western Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m. Again, I just felt it was necessary because a lot of times our focus and the narrative over time starts to change and distort a bit and become simplified to just planes hitting the World Trade Center, they collapsed. And I think it's really, really important for in order for us to pay the proper respect and to the depth of that experience. I have some other stories that I will share here in a moment. But first, I would like to tell you, Art, where I was on 9/11 when this occurred. I was in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana, at a hospital doing an acting job. They had hired about 12 actors to go in as patients. We were playing patients, and they were doctors that were coming in, fourth, fifth year, and sixth year med students to diagnose us and all these sorts of things with hidden cameras in the room. So they thought that these were genuine patients and that we were really ill and we had been given, been briefed on these conditions and the different symptoms and all these sorts of things. And so this was played out full out. And we were preparing for this day. These are normally 8-hour days. And at some point during these examinations, a buzzer goes off, and then all of a sudden I pull out a clipboard, and these guys are like, like on the spot, like, what did you do correctly? What did you do incorrectly? How was your patient care? How was your diagnosis? And all that sort of thing. This program was started to alleviate malpractice lawsuits because prior to a program like that, the only training that doctors would have engaging actual patients were actual real situations. And people were really getting hurt, and plenty of lawsuits were flying because misdiagnosis and these sorts of things. Anyway, we were preparing for a day of this, and I had left the briefing room, and I was heading to the bathroom to get changed into my clinic, my little smock thing, my patient gear, right? You basically disrobe and put this wrap on. As I was walking to the bathroom, I happened to glance at a open clinic that had glass windows, and I was looking at the television in that room, and there was smoke billowing out of one of the World Trade Center towers. Now, I lived in New York for 9 years, so I know this ground. I've been through that building a million times, and I was looking at the screen, watching this, and as I'm watching it, I could not hear the audio because I wasn't in the room with the folks, so I don't know what, but I was just watching the video. And at the time that I was watching it, the second plane came in and hit the building. And I was, I was just beside myself. I was in shock. And I remember instead of going to the bathroom, I ran back into to our meeting room, and I told the coordinator of this program, I said, there is a major event going on right now, and you might want to come in here and take a look at this because I think it can disrupt what your plans are for this day. Because certainly there would be doctors and med students there who would have loved ones in New York City, have people that were in the World Trade Center or thereabouts, and this could just cause mayhem for the entire day. So I remember that so vividly. When that went down, I actually witnessed the second plane hit the building. And again, it felt like I was looking at a video game or some surreal activity, but it was real time. And so that's where I was. And that was my experience of that part of the day. So very, very heavy duty stuff. So we are ready for a break now. Art, it is a pleasure having you here with me today to have this discussion, sir. And I think that your perspective, certainly being that you were, in India, being able to see that event taking place from afar, and your observations regarding the brown-skinned people, the people of, Asia, and how they all get, because I too, being my skin tone, had me getting stopped in airports and everything else and put on suspicious lists that I was unaware of. And I'd get on a plane, get off the plane, was escorted to a room, disrobed in some instances, all kind of stuff
Wow.
going on, get back on a plane, the next stop, get harassed in the same way. So I totally get that, And it's unfortunate, and that profiling thing. It's really, really unfortunate. So we are ready for a break right now, and you're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we're talking about remembering September the 11th, perspectives 20 years later with my guest, Shrian Tiwari. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. We are back. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires with my guest today, Shrian Tiwari. And I would like to share, first of all, this is a wonderful time on several different channels. Out there are numerous programs and series that are taking place and that are they're commemorating this 20-year anniversary. And I've seen a number of these programs here recently. Most notably is a series that I caught on Hulu that is produced by National Geographic, and it's called 9/11, One Day in America. Very, very powerful, compelling pieces. And I saw and heard many, many detailed details about 9/11 and testimonies from folks and footage that I had never seen before. And one of the things that I would like to share is, again, some of the stories from the first responders that were there. This particular series, 9/11, One Day in America, actually opens up with a statement from FDNY battalion chief of the 1st Battalion in New York. And Chief Pfeiffer said, "Many people ask me what it was like that day. And I think what they're asking is, what was it like to be a part of history?" And then I tell them my story. And I tell them there were signs of devastation everywhere, but there were also signs of hope. And at this extraordinary time in history, there were little moments of caring for another, with the difference between life and death. That blew me away. I mean, just the idea of that, you know what I mean? Just the idea that is his story. That's all he has to say about this. He was the first battalion chief on the scene. He was actually like three blocks away from World Trade Center when it hit. And I just can't even imagine the experience of those folks who are having to deal with it. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier today, Art, and I just said, there's no fire ladder or truck that goes up that high. At some point, you may be looking at a thing and really going, I don't have anything for this. You know what I mean? There are bodies clinging to the outside of the building, people making these choices between whether they want to stay in the building and be burned alive or jump, assuring death. I mean, but those kinds of choices being pitted in front of people it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine.
And we are creatives, storytellers, actors, writers here, and it's our job to imagine and empathize, right? In some ways, and I have tried. There's certain stories that I work with. I've tried. Like I often think of what you were saying, the flight that went down in Pennsylvania, and the courage and motivation of people in the flight to decide that, if it takes us down, fine, but we're not going to let this go in any other direction. And making that call, and it just baffles me, but the human courage and human spirit on both ends were the people who conducted this horrible crime, horrible actions, to people who suffered in its aftermath, to people who took action to help people. Like, I've heard a lot of the stories. My wife was in New York. She used to live in New York, uptown at that time. She was in Columbia, and it was felt firsthand all the way in the entire city. People could see the smoke, the effects of that. And then as I worked there in downtown for many years, and when I came even after 5-6 years, there was buildings that still had broken glass, and and everything, and it took almost a decade to clean up the rubble it's baffling. And I also many times have thought of, when I've stood there at the site several times, I always think of that, like the people that were in that flight or in those flights, and what would have been going through their mind in that moment. But people did step up. I attended the 10-year ceremony in 2011. I was in New York, and the chief was there amongst many others, and I heard him speak myself. And it's the remarkable thing from that day was how people stood together for each other in New York, in America, and in the world to some extent. And our indomitable spirit to fight against evil and step, and a lot has happened. The world has changed. There's not just pre 9/11 and post 9/11 America. It's like pre 9/11, post 9/11 world. And it's when you were explaining about the event the day, I was thinking about that it's been 20 years. There's probably many kids out there who might be just learning about this this year, because 20-year will be a bigger marker in conversation, because every year there is, but it just becomes just a passing marker right after that. I
Right.
mean, it becomes like hashtag never forget, and then we forget.
Right.
Right. No. And I see people there at the memorial taking selfies with this big grins on their face, and it angers me. And that like, do you, and the people taking, like, whatever, like uh a new, what is this, like the child announcement and all, like this celebratory things, and they're like, this is a beautiful spot, let me. But and people forget that memorials are for us to remember what took place, and maybe, if not learn something from it, at least have some sympathy and empathy for what happened there. And sure, you
Right.
have seen that in such places, and it just angers me when people are there. It's like, let me take a this jumping selfie for my Instagram page, and it's
Yeah. Yeah,
it's
I'm with you on that, man. It's so important because what we are speaking of in these kinds of spaces is that they are sacred. It's sacred ground. It is the burial of it. You know what I mean? It is sacred ground, and I think that yeah, a lot of times we get sort of confused in how do we honor that properly. Uh, yeah, it's even difficult to use words like anniversary because it feels by nature celebratory, and
right.
it's not at all. You know what I mean? It's a tragic event, so there's no call for the parties and happy anniversary. There's nothing happy about these things, you know.
Right.
So it becomes very very strained in how we choose to uh, honor honor these things. But before we go too much further, I want to give you your props,
Ah,
uh, Art, because I don't know if many people know the full story of me in a podcast, but I must say that it was during the George Floyd stuff and very early in that, in which you called our good friend, our mutual friend, Lapacazo Sandoval, reached out to me and said you wanted to do a show on um, racism and and you needed a subject, you needed someone to speak with on that, and she recommended me, and I'm so grateful that she did because it was a result of doing your show and us speaking openly about that, that was about a week later that I was contacted by another person that I know, Carla, who is with the Inspired Choices Network. She had a show with this network, and I did her show. And as a result of that, um, I wound up meeting and speaking with the producer of her show, and then eventually Christine McIver, the owner of the network. So that is the series of events. So I must say, and give you your props, brother, because that really gave me a bit of the confidence and the courage that I needed to say, hey, I can do this. So that was the
and
first podcast. Your art of the
I,
matter, or what is
art
it?
approved.
Art
Art
approved.
approved. I will send the link, and maybe we can share that. But to all listeners, you should definitely check out. It was a beautiful conversation, and we talked for over an hour. And I've known you for many years, even before that, through our mutual friend Pakuzo. And you're a very multi-talented man. But I've learned things about you that I did not know, and it was a very dark time in America, at least in my lifetime, for the country that I chose as my home.
Mm,
And what happened with some of those things last year was, I mean, and I've as a non-white man, I have experienced many of those experiences firsthand that I did not know about America, and that's something I was saying, that growing up in another country, you have this image of America as this, beacon of like, this amazing place, and you see all these great movies, and all the aliens attack America, and then the
Right.
people, people fight back and win over and everything, and you have this idea of American greatness, and you have no idea of the darkness that this country is built up upon, and the darkness that still persists in the country, unfortunately. And I've experienced that firsthand. But that was a very hurtful moment for all of us. And I was fortunate to have you, on the podcast. And I was trying to talk to certain, people that I know in my circle and have this firsthand conversation.
Yeah.
Because I may be a non-white man, but I'm not. I'm not a black man, and I do not have to share the same experience. I was not born and raised here as a black man, and this is. But I do want to understand, and with our podcast and these platforms that we have some voice, and the least we can do is to raise that voice, and of course, more we should do. But I was very fortunate, and that was a very enlightening conversation, and I'm very glad that that inspired you further to take on this beautiful journey where you've had some fantastic conversations that I've been hearing, and you're a very inspiring man, and I feel fortunate that I was a little part of that journey.
Yeah, man, you were the beginning of the journey. So, and
And
again,
kindling, little kindling. The fire is all
right,
there, but little
right.
kindling. Sometimes you just need that little spark, right?
That's
Yeah,
it, man.
anyway.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So,
And because I was mildly hesitant to do because I knew that I was uncertain of where I would go with that because articulating um again early stage sort of George Floyd thing, and if we're not careful, just like you mentioned about 9/11 and how it just becomes like, again, so a celebration, it sort of becomes trivialized in a very curious way. And I would say that the same thing only a year ago, George Floyd and those protests and stuff have all sort of piped down. And ironically, if you look at the facts, the same rate of, unarmed, black men being killed or accosted by the police, that number has not slowed down or was altered at all as a result of all that's been going on. In fact, just when we look at what's going on in Texas and the voting rights stuff, it seems even more emboldened the moves to suppress or to oppress people of color, and it so it we're still in it, man. Nothing was resolved. You know what I mean? Nothing was
and
resolved.
and it's just so maddening. And that's the thing, this idea of America that I mean, I wouldn't say I was not America crazy in India. I mean, India is a great country in its own right. Like I was not fleeing oppression or anything, but when I came here, and
Hmm.
things have changed so much. Even in 2007, when I came here, I found it to be. I came to Washington D.C. and I found it exciting. I found it different. I found people. I saw people like I came to New York and all people of all color and type and all here, and it's so much under the surface, like it's like ingrained that you don't observe it until you start looking for it, right? Just I'm here, I'm like, okay, it's just happening, and sometimes I'm racially profiled or something. I guess it's okay. I mean, but it's not okay. We just we live with it, and we start thinking it's okay
Right,
because it's
right.
happening, and then I something that I felt that for the longest time, at least for many years in the beginning, for me it was just fitting in with the white man. And I mean, I have a lot of white friends, and there's nothing against, but this idea of like, somehow you have to fit in with white people, and then you're okay, and if you don't, then you're not okay, then something's wrong.
Right.
And as an immigrant, and like that's what and I had no shame in, like, I grew up in India, so I was a proud Indian, like proud brown man. But still, it was this idea of somehow that I have to be accepted
Right.
to be here. And if a white person talks to you nicely, it's like, oh wow, so this is like such a good man. Why? Why are you a good
Right.
man? Like what goodness have you brought in? But I'm just saying that we are suppressed, or not just suppressed, it's just like normalized in a way that we just don't realize how we are getting oppressed,
Right.
which
Exactly.
I found, when I started realizing it as a storyteller, when I started stepping out of my immediate corporate circle, because corporate circle is very different, right? I'm in there and we're together, but we go out for a lunch, and I'm the one that has this team. I'm the the manager. I'm the leader. I go out with the team, and there's this one white person, and the waiter comes and brings the check to the white person. It's like I'm like,
Yeah, I got you, man. It is crazy, and you're right.
so
It just becomes sort of normalized and the American way. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. We are here discussing. We are remembering September the 11th. Perspectives 20 years later with my good friend Art Shrian. We'll be back in just a moment.
Today, we are facing some of the greatest challenges of our lives, from our health to political unrest, the environment, financial uncertainty, and the nation's racial divide. Tune in every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Bill Myers Inspires, as he and his guests take a deep dive into the issues that impact our world with an eye to exploring solutions. Emmy Award-winning actor Bill Myers is an accomplished actor, jazz musician, filmmaker, writer, educator, and speaker. As a biracial man who's both black and white, Bill leverages his background, talent, and voice through creativity, compassion, and connection as activism for social justice to focus on uniting the divide and compelling change. Bill Myers Inspires encourages listeners to look within themselves and take decisive action to make a positive difference. For more information, visit his website, BillMyersInspires.com, and sign in for the latest news and updates.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires here on the Inspired Choices Network. We're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining us. And now, let's get back to the conversation. You're listening to Bill Myers Inspires, and we are back. Art, I want to share a little story with you. This one I sort of transcribed from this 9/11 one day, what was the name of the program again? The One Day in America, National Geographic series. I highly recommend folks take a look at that. It's probably about 4 or 5 parts, but very, very powerful. And it's some of these individuals' stories, again, ones that I had not heard. These were not the handful that we heard over and over in the news over the last 20 years. This one story just grabbed me in such a way that I wrote it out. I transcribed it because I wanted to share it with the audience today. And so here we go. A man whose important business meeting had just been changed to the Marriott at the World Trade Center location the day before recalls, I smelled kerosene in the hotel lobby. So I walked over to the revolving doors and looked out. I couldn't figure out what was happening. I saw a woman coming through the haze with her hands out. And I couldn't figure out for the life of me what was wrong with her. As I went closer to her and she walked to me, I could see she was badly burned. And I could see that she was still smoldering. So I brought her into the lobby and I sat down with her. I sat her down by the wall. She said she couldn't see and that there was a ball of flame. And her eyes were like pretty much burnt shut. So after a minute or two, and after I could get her calmed down a little bit, I asked her name. She said her name was Jenny Ann Matheo. And she said she was on her way to work. And then she said, "Holy Jesus, Mother of God, don't let me die." She said, "Help me. Don't let me die. Help me." When I was on the floor with Jenny Ann, I held her hand and I yelled numerous times for EMS and emergency services for help. Nobody was coming. People were just running by one after another, and I got concerned. So I ran into the bathroom, pulled a clean plastic bag, and I filled it with water and patted Jenny Ann down with it. And I could see that Jenny Ann's clothes were fused into her skin. And while we were on the floor, and when there was no emergency help or aid coming, and Jenny Ann was getting more and more concerned she was going to die, she said, "Sacred Heart of Jesus, save me. I don't want to die." And I said, "Are you Catholic?" And she said she was. And I said, "Let's say the Lord's Prayer." Man, that's tough stuff. Um,
Yeah.
the trauma, I guess that's one of the things I'd like to discuss and sort of float by you, Art, is the trauma. When I think of 9/11 and what I witnessed and what it did to me, and I was in Indianapolis, Indiana, but again, very much kindred ground being in New York and worried about plenty of my people there and not knowing what the hell's going on with them. When I think about 9/11 and what lasting effect or what trauma do I experience, my own little version of PTSD, I can tell you very simply. When I hear the sound of a jet plane going above me and it sounds close, I drop into a panic. I immediately look up and I'm in like a defense posture, like run for cover, because I can hear that the plane, I can hear the jet, you know what I mean? And it's sort of whistling. It sounds way too close, and I'm fearful that it's another incident about to occur. And I discovered that this morning as I was like sort of sitting up and really thinking about preparing for the show and just going, what out of that experience really gets under my skin? It's the sound of the jet plane, the jet engines passing by too closely, you know.
Mm.
So, do you have any things that I mean, of course, any things from the 9/11 experience, and even been here in America, and the profiling certainly is a byproduct of this paranoia, but it's also the truth of America's racism all along anyway, because profiling was going on not because of 9/11. It's been going on to certain communities forever. I'm very curious about what your experience is. I've done 2 shows on the anti-Asian hate crime stuff. And have you had any experiences relative to that business? Because of course the China flu pandemic, all of that stuff. I mean, again, you are you're Indian, man. So I mean, have you
Yeah,
parts of that?
it's I mean, it's yeah, as I said, like this is this whole. Uh, I mean, but to your earlier point, right now, I know that this profiling and racism was not is not in any way, shape, or form byproduct of 9/11. It just it just opened the opportunity for the oppressors to oppress more. And some of that was required. I'm not saying, some of that was probably required. With that was, of course, steps had to be taken. Don't get me wrong, but it's hasn't the American thing is for the oppressor to use every opportunity to oppress more. Use that as how
Right.
they can abuse that to benefit themselves and advantage themselves and propagate that agenda that still exists of white supremacy and and white privilege, and it is extending that white privilege further because all of these things affect the people of color, right? It doesn't affect the white people. It affects at least not the same way.
Right.
So everything becomes an opportunity for some. Some take it very seriously and for the right reasons, and some of those are required, Patriot Act included. But I have friends who have born and raised here. One of my friends, a filmmaker, just published an article in the New York Magazine this week about her experience growing up in the middle of the country during that time and how everything changed after that for her.
Right.
And and how she was taking a picture post 9/11. She was very much in high school and was very much into photography, and she got FBI. Somebody reported that FBI was in her house, and her parents were questioned. They were questioned, why were you taking that picture? Because somebody reported a Middle Eastern looking girl was taking picture out in the fields.
Wow.
Uh, so uh, so, was that necessary? I don't know. I don't think so. There's been like a lot of this unfortunate, abuse of that, and but the racism in America is not new, right? I mean, you have lived here, and probably experienced. It's been older than that, right? It's just more and more people are like with this Asian hate crimes recently. It has existed, but it just becomes another uh, community starts getting firsthand affected in that brutal way. Like the African Americans and Black people in America have been on that, unfortunately, on that receiving end for so long, from the days of slavery till date. And
Right.
now we have some or a version of that oppression and hate and whatever wakes people up, right?
Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
right,
Exactly.
whatever expert the one thing that I would say that I think you and I can agree on, I always said that we are in this together. If 9/11 can teach you something, that our spirit is strong, and 20 years past, we are in this together, black, brown, Asian, and white as well. And if we don't live and fight and support each other together, it's just a downward path. But if in that time, for a moment, I think everybody was together, uh,
Right. Right.
and
No, you
sometimes
got
that's what unites us. But if we can just remember that feeling and unite each other with each other,
absolutely.
it makes a much
Absolutely.
better world.
Absolutely. You are correct, man. And Art, man, it has been a wonderful, wonderful occasion to have you on the show. I really so appreciate your contribution and your perspective. Again, it's a unique perspective, and you're right. I think there's a common ground, and it's refreshing to hear that again. So I thank you for being here, and
Thank
I
you.
and I look forward to the next time that we can chop it up, sir. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a
Thanks for
blessing.
having me.
You are so welcome, and we'll catch you next week. Thank you for spending your afternoon right here with us at Bill Myers Inspires. Remember, we're here every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Inspired Choices Network. Remember to take time this week to take a breath and look within yourself and figure out how you can make a positive difference in this world. Spread the word, and we'll see you here next Friday. Have a wonderful week.